Hey, crew. Welcome to another edition of the Skippy Report with my good friend Jeff McKague. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Skippy Report. So, as the intro said, I'm sitting here with my good friend Jeff McKague, and we're sitting in his shop. So, you might hear some funny noises if the heater kicks on. We've shut it off right now. And we're sitting in between two of his trailers. So, welcome, Jeff.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to do with this is just have great conversations with friends of mine. One of the things was, I don't know, how long have we been friends? Justin was like 6 months old when you moved next door?
Yeah, he's 21 now.
Okay, so 20 years.
Yep.
Now, I had no idea. I don't know if Jeff remembers the first time that we met.
I am not sure that I do remember.
I thought you worked for Mike, the guy who did your home inspection.
Right.
I can't remember Mike O'Grady, because I used to sail with him, so I thought you were one of his employees. And Jeff was moving in or thinking of buying the house next door to me, which was kind of interesting. So, because Jeff has quite an interesting past. Maybe you could give us a little bit of background of where you're from, and people who don't know Jeff, he's works in, I don't know, the automotive industry.
Yeah, it's very generally. I do work in the automotive industry. My background is not automotive. It's business related. In as far as education, I grew up in St. Catharines, just the other side of the lake from where we are now. And as I grew, one of the things my father did was he took me to some car races, just dirt track car races, and I enjoyed that. And immediately started to get drawn to driving as opposed to the cars themselves, and had a bit of a passion for that throughout my adolescence, and I ended up getting a job, as you do in the Niagara area. One of the jobs that's available to younger kids is working on a farm picking fruit, and so I did that. And at the age of 15, I became a supervisor, and part of my role as a supervisor is I would drive a flat deck car around the field to pick up the fruit that everybody had picked. And so I had a Pinto, a flat deck Pinto. And when there was no fruit on it, I would be driving it pretty hard, sliding it around. I only hit a tree once. But I think that sort of ignited a bit of a passion in driving, and it took me down the field of automotive, and that's where I've stayed for the rest of my life.
Now, that's kind of interesting, because most people get started in automotive racing, car racing, that sort of stuff, by being interested in wrenching and working on cars and going from there. But you just wanted to drive.
Yeah, and it's I don't know whether it's hurt me or not throughout the years, not being overly interested in the minutia of the car and understanding all the data of the car and every car's horsepower. I envy the people that have that passion, and I hire them too because I need them, because I don't have it. It's more the driving and I guess a little bit more of the psychology behind the driver of the car that interests me more in what a driver's basic responses would be. And in the field that we've further gotten into, which is car racing, we are now dealing with the more elite of, as a driver, how you overcome fear, how you can capitalize on understanding the next level of ability, of your ability, and as a driver, and how to extrapolate the most speed out of a car. Those things really thrill me, and maybe I'm one-dimensional in that sense, but that really is where my passion lies.
I think it's kind of cool. So the build up to this is that you went from a kid driving a flatbed Pinto, and Jeff has raced professionally and coached. So if you could give us a little bit of background about that.
Sure. I've never made it to the high levels of racing. There's a big part of the high level of racing that is, I guess it escapes me a little bit in that the bigger part is it's a lot of money, and a lot of money is not what I have. So it's always been dependent on sponsors. So there's the boardroom and the sales of the sponsorship, and I've not had that perfect mix of that. So the other door of getting into car racing and doing some car racing is by coaching. And again, my understanding of and want to understand of the philosophy of the driver, and learning those abilities is took me to coaching and instructing. So the instruction started when I was in my early 20s, right out of post-secondary school, where I took business, and it drove the passion. The boss that I had at the time put me into a go-kart because he didn't have the time to take his son to go-karting, and he wanted his son to race, and his son was 8 years old. So he and the son, that is, and myself went to the go-kart track and started racing go-karts. And then the next year I bought a car, and we started endurance racing right after that. And all the while I'm teaching people on the racetrack. And the place where I started teaching is Canada's fastest racetrack. Well, in fact, we're actually thinking it's the fastest racetrack still in North America, which is Mosport, which is now labeled as Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. And I still teach there to this day, more on a part-time basis now. But the teaching has been something that's been relatively constant throughout my business career. Is regardless of what I've been doing, I've been going back to the racetrack and doing some teaching, if not a major part of teaching. And that's led me down the path of coaching race drivers as well. I started that a number of years ago. And typically I'm coaching gentleman racers, which are guys that are a little older, have spent some time in business, made some money, and they want to go racing, and they have a little bit of money to spend so that they don't spend it in crashing on the track. They spend it on a coach who can hopefully keep them from crashing, and be a catalyst to their education on the racetrack. Racing is difficult to explain. A lot of people expect it to be, well, just put your foot down and go fast. It's a lot more difficult than that. And once you get behind the wheel, or even in the passenger seat of a car that somebody really knows how to drive and take it around a racetrack, you realize that there's a lot of fear involved. There's a number of skills that are only learned once you get to a particular speed and limit of traction, and those are the skills that take a long time to build in most people. And by us working with more gentleman type racers, and that's a loose term. I mean, it doesn't have to be a male by any means. I've coached a number of female drivers who have equal amount of difficulty to any of the males that I've taught. But I've taught young and old, and the passion is always there. I love to see the when they do the breakthrough of being good on the racetrack to suddenly understanding what it is to drive that extra it's almost like crossing a line and getting to that point of a drive or ability to drive the car just that little bit over the limit and not be fearful of it. Always say that there always is fear. It's just how you are able to press it down and put it into and drive it out of and put it into the passion of being able to control it. And I know by Skippy here, I got to ask you about that name in a minute, is a skier. So there's probably going to be a lot of people at ski that will be listening to this. And the understanding of this would be, I think it's labeled as not giant slalom, but downhill.
Yeah.
And downhill skiing would be very much like what we do on the racetrack. There's definitely an element of fear. There's the element of being on the limit and almost crashing, and sometimes crashing. And all of that is there when it comes to car racing. And that is, it's for some people. It's not for everybody, but it's definitely the same element of lines. There's a lot of correlations between the two lines. You're dealing with gravity. You're dealing with trying to get the most out of the skis, so you have the right wax for that particular day. We do the same thing with tire pressures and setups on the cars. There's so many correlations, but every skier knows that there's a lot to be learned from a coach, regardless. And same thing when it comes to car racing. So, and that's kind of where we are. I don't know whether I went too far on that.
No. That's great, because when you were relating everything to skiing, Jeff and I have talked numerous times about similarities. I used to instruct bike cops in safe operation, doing emergency maneuvers on a bicycle, that sort of stuff. Also with skiing, setting up for, going around gates when I used to race, the apex of a turning around a gate, similar to the apex of going around a corner in a car, and understanding all that sort of stuff. So Jeff and I have always had all sorts of conversations about that. And when he was talking about getting to a certain point in his racing career, it always brings me back to the point where if you want to make $1 million in car racing, start with $2 million.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about Jeff's racing background. The other thing that he does now, he's started a company called Event Matrix, and we're sitting in between his two trailers in his shop. And I would describe his company as that he introduces new vehicles to journalists and sometimes to the public. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah. Again, automotive industry. We have some automotive manufacturer clients where we do introductions of vehicles, mostly to automotive journalists. That's what's keeping us busy right now. But we also do training for dealer sales staff and do consumer drives as well. And what a consumer drive is the manufacturer will give us a group of cars, vehicles, let's put it that way. I mean, it may be SUVs or pickup trucks. And our job is to entertain in some fashion the general public to come and drive the vehicles, so that they're not actually in the vehicles with salespeople. They're in with our staff who are trained professionals in driving in some aspect, and they can relate all of the technology of the car to the person who's driving, and show how good the technology is, and it just gives them that test drive where you're getting almost a product specialist as opposed to a salesperson, so that the agenda is not the same, and therefore they get more people behind the wheel. So those are the three automotive ends. We also do tire testing for a national retailer, and we do a number of other things too. We provide drivers for video shoots in some cases. Typically they're dealer type video shoots, and almost anything to do with vehicles. Obviously the track stuff we do, lapping days to go-kart events to anything that's corporate related. So there's just pretty much, if there's a turning wheel, we can manage it. Our expertise and where we focus most of our energy is doing the launches of the vehicles to the automotive journalists, which takes us across the country and sometimes across North America to actually facilitate them.
And that's sort of how I met Jeff, or got an introduction to him, because I remember it was the year that BMW was reintroducing a new 7 Series, and he had brought a car home. And at that time, when you had purchased a car, Jeff would show up with the car and spend an afternoon with you to teach you the iDrive system. I guess that was the main thing.
It was a new introduction of technology in the BMW 7 Series. Yeah, so we through BMW, and I didn't have my company at that time. That was prior to my company. I was hired as a specialist, and we drove the car, not the customer's car, but a car from BMW Canada to their location, and took them out for a drive for about an hour. And we did 3 of these per day. And the idea was to get them comfortable with the car. It was a new system. It was the kind of the introduction to having a computer within your car. And there was some trepidation to having that much technology in a car at that particular time, and how am I going to deal with it? And the bottom line was that we were going to people and kind of assessing them as to, how easy it was going to be for them to adopt that technology. Some people were very technologically advanced who were buying this car, and some were not. Some just didn't care about it. And the nice thing about the car was that you didn't need to use the technology. You could set up some very basic things, and like how you like the heat in the seat, because you could move the heat in different parts of your driver's seat when you wanted to, if you wanted to. But if you just wanted a basic seat heater, just set it up as a basic seat heater, press the button, good to go. So it was it was more of an introduction for everybody, just to not be as nervous about the car. And once we took them out for an hour and kind of showed them what they could do and what they only had to do, the minimum was good. And so I had that. I think we did that for about 3 months.
Yeah, I remember the first day you brought it home, and I like cars. I'm not a real big car geek, but I just like cars like most guys. So I went over, and Jeff was learning stuff, and he says, "Get in." So I went to get in the passenger side. He goes, "No, get in the driver's side. You'll be the client." So we went out for a little bit of a drive, and I'd never been in a car like that before. And as we're zipping down the 401, and for the American listeners, that's like your interstate system, Jeff says, "Remember, you have to pay the speeding tickets," because without any awareness, I was already up to like 110 miles an hour. I was doing 170 kilometers an hour. So it was, I was like, oh, I got to slow down. Can't even feel that speed in that car. So it's like, yeah, that was my introduction. And if you're a guy who likes cars, Jeff is the neighbor that you want to have live next door to you, because he would bring home some really cool things. So I remember one summer they were introducing or reintroducing the new Beetle, and he was doing a tour across Canada, and I think there was a Beetle race car that showed up in a trailer, and the suspension was so stiff that they had a hard time going in his driveway. And Jeff has friends who race in CASCAR, which is the Canadian version of NASCAR, and Robin, I can't remember Robin's last name.
Buck.
Right, Robin Buckwood. One of his crew showed up with the race car, and both of my girls like cars, and they would watch racing with me, and so it was really cool. You get this neighbor who's got all these exotic cars show up to his house, and you can check them out, and he would take us along, invite us to go to races, and we'd get to go into the pits, and my girls got to meet drivers and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's that's how I think our relationship really got started. And then as everybody knows, I cycle a whole lot, and Jeff got into cycling, and we would spend most Saturdays or Sunday mornings cycling and that sort of stuff. And I was able to convince Jeff to tour by bicycle. And Jeff is like one of those guys like me. If you need a training buddy, I'm there. Anyways, Jeff, he's such a good friend. It's like, yeah, we could do that. But Jeff had never ridden. What, the furthest distance you had ridden, I think before our tour, was like 40, maybe 50 kilometers.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember the first day I actually got on a bicycle. You actually lent me one of your bicycles. Might have been Sean.
It was Sean's, yeah.
And I think we went 15 kilometers, and I came back and my legs were jello. I could barely stand up afterwards. I'm like, I can't do this. And anyway, over time, I started riding more and more. And yeah, well, the first time we went for our first long ride, Keith, I don't know whether he realizes, or I think he eventually realized that when you challenge Jeff, Jeff steps up. It's like an idiot.
Yeah.
And I don't know where this was in the whole mix. It must have been after that I did a triathlon. That's a separate story. But Keith said, "Hey, go on a ride around Lake Ontario." And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun."
Yeah.
He says, "Yeah, we'll take a week, do 7 days, and we'll ride around Lake Ontario." I'm like, "Okay, yeah." A whole day riding. I'm always having to squeeze a ride in the morning, and I'm pressing because I've got young kids at home, and I've got to get back and make sure I do my share of hanging out with the kids and all the chores that need to be done and that. So I can't spend a whole lot of time just heading out and doing something like riding for 5-6 hours. So Keith and I would go out early in the morning on a weekend, usually 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. We'd take off and go for a ride and get back around 9:30. So it wasn't a really long ride, but then he said, "Well, let's, what do you think about riding around Lake Ontario?" I'm like, I think that sounds like a great challenge. And yeah, Keith's right in that is probably 40 kilometers, that 40, 50 kilometers that I'd done. And we're planning this thing out, and Keith's done all the planning, where we're going to stop each day, and we're going to take off, and we're going to go stay at a friend's place in Mississauga.
That's right. Yep.
I'm like, oh wow, that's a long way.
Yeah, we live 100 kilometers east of Toronto, and their place may have been 40 to 50 kilometers west of.
Oh, I remember
Toronto.
Exactly how far it was. It was 141 kilometers that we did, and added to that, I've not towed or had extra weight on the bicycle. So now we estimated about 80 pounds that I'm towing with a trailer, as well as now I'm riding somewhere in the range of 100 kilometers more than I've ever ridden in a day. On my first day.
Yeah.
And I am scared.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, and you know what, we're traveling through, we live in a pleasant rural countryside, and then we're traveling through the metropolis of Toronto, traffic everywhere, cars everywhere. But thankfully we have the waterfront trail, and so we were able to ride that most of the time. So it tries to take you on more quiet roads. But yeah, it was... that was a really good, fun time. We got around the U.S. We quickly learned how the interstate system, or the invention of big box stores, kind of destroyed little towns. Because along here in Canada, as you travel along the byways, you come across small grocery stores and towns where you can get groceries and stuff. But in the U.S., we'd have to ride out 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers out to the interstate to where the big box stores were, so that we could get groceries. So there were some times we had some pretty sketchy meals. And Jeff even found out that there are some types of American beer, this was before craft beer, that were quite strong. This Steeler beer that we found. And Jeff, after riding all day, not consuming a whole lot of food, just enough to get you by, we each had a quart of this beer, and Jeff got the nickname Church Lady. And just from his antics, it reminded me of Dana Carvey. Is it Carvey?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
right.
I think so, yeah. From Saturday Night Live in his Church Lady skits.
Yeah. Yeah, so I became Church Lady.
Yeah.
Of course. It's a story that lives and has lived for at least a decade. But it's probably the best buzz I've had. It was pretty entertaining, I've got to say. I mean, it was probably day 3, something like that. We'd gone into the US day 2.
Yeah, because we
St.
stayed at your
Catharines.
parents' on the second night in St. Catharines.
Yeah, so either day 3 or day 4 of the ride, and so I'd gotten over the anxiety of not knowing whether I'm going to make it. I now sort of settled into, I can do this, and it became a lot of fun, and we enjoyed ourselves, and especially in the U.S., where we found just everybody seemed to like cyclists, especially ones that were touring, and obviously touring, and we were, because we were packed down with bags and camping gear and trailer and that, and almost every intersection that we had to stop at, we had somebody rolling down their window of the car asking us where we're going and wishing us luck. And
which the coolest thing was when we rolled through construction sites. So in the U.S., in different states, they have these rules. So the first construction site we rolled through, it may have been a half a mile long.
And when you say construction site, just to clarify,
road construction.
So they had closed one lane because they were working on a lane. There was only 2 lanes, and so traffic at each end of the construction would have to stop, and only one direction would go. So there was flag people there, and they would let you through. And so continue on now.
And anyway, so we did the first one like that, and then when we got to the second construction site, we're near Rochester, New York, or just past Rochester, heading eastbound. I told the girl that they didn't have to hold up all the traffic, and she's like, no, that's our state law. When there are bicycles in a road construction site where there's lane reduction, they have to hold traffic at both ends. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, that doesn't happen up here in Canada. And cycling is really good. It's a great way to see the country. You're traveling at a slow pace. You're outside all the time. You need to stop for directions. I learned a trick is that you find somebody mowing their lawn or somebody outside, or even go into a business, introduce yourself, tell them what you're doing, ask about the construction site, because we came upon this one construction site, or the signs anyway, and it said, we had to go way out. When we look at the map, it was quite a ways out of our way. So we asked this guy who sold lawnmowers. He had a business, and he reminded me of the guys from Orange County Choppers, Paul Tootle. He's a little guy, smaller version of him. He's like so friendly. He goes, oh yeah, you can get through there, but you know what? If you want to stay here, you can pitch your tents. I got a pond in the back, all that sort of stuff. So people were always so friendly when we were touring. and we've done a few tours. The second tour we did around the lake, I've been around the lake 4 times. Jeff has been around twice. And the second time, Jeff decided to use it as a fundraising event for your church, right? Because they were doing remodeling work.
Yeah. So we did a fundraiser for that. And so it was we tried to make it 1,000 kilometers distance.
Yeah, because the usual trip is about 700 or 800, depending how far away from the shore you go.
Yeah. So our path this time took us. I think we nicknamed it the Canal trip.
Yeah.
Because we went and rode beside for definitely a couple beside the Welland Canal for quite a distance.
Yeah.
Once we crossed over into the U.S., we went and rode along the Erie Canal. For a distance, and then we crossed, what was the last one, Trent Severn?
Yeah. In Kingston, would we have crossed? Yeah. No, we didn't cross. We were right beside the Rideau Canal, or the waterway that goes up to Ottawa,
right,
from Kingston to Ottawa.
Yeah.
So, and you know what is interesting? Like, Jeff and I probably grew up watching the same American TV stations, and we would hear about Spencerport, Brockport, all these sorts of places, Machias. I don't think that's near it, but And as we rode our bicycles along these places, they're ports on a canal, and they're little tiny villages. I thought they were larger towns, on the lake. It was really interesting, and it was spent a lot of time on gravel, washing bikes and that sort of stuff. And I remember we came upon that one group who were out raising money for a camp in the U.S. for kids who have cancer. And I know that some of the TV personalities on the CBS station out of Buffalo, I think they raise money for them. Anyways, we came across these people, and they welcomed us in. They had a shower all set up that we were able to use. It was kind of cold.
Quite the shower. 3 tarps and a cold water spigot.
Yep. But you know what? They fed us, and we hung around the entire evening with them, and we got up the next morning, and they fed us again and got us on our way. Yeah, it was...
and they were doing their own endurance, too. They were paddling.
Right. I
believe it was an 8-person canoe
yeah.
down the Erie Canal. And so because we were riding along the Erie Canal, and we were on fairly decent gravel. I mean, it was dusty. And when we finished, we were really just black with dirt.
Every day we had to wash our bikes, and from our knees down, we're filthy.
Yeah, but that was pretty neat. They did welcome us in. There was 20 or so of them, and we, as Keith said, we used their shower independently, and nothing weird going on. And we had a meal with them. It was great fun.
Yeah, and I just remember at Camp Good Days, it was called, that they were raising the money for. So so it's that was really cool, riding those canals. There's a lot of American history there and Canadian history. The Erie Canal was built so that the Americans didn't have to use the lake and get shot out of the water by the English at the time. So, and then one of the other trips that we did was, I told Jeff, I said, "You want to ride to Kingston and back in a day?" He's like, "Sure." But Jeff thought that he would just ride to Kingston and then get a ride back.
Yeah.
So,
well, as I put it, well, I'll ride to Kingston. I'll take the ambulance back.
Yeah.
Keith's idea, and I don't know why I fall for these every time, but Keith's idea is I want to ride 200 miles in a day. And I'm like, oh, that's a little crazy. But sure, let's do it. And so we went for it. And
we did a little bit of research.
Yeah.
You take halfway through the ride on a big day like that. The research I did said, take a different set of cycling shorts, a different set of gloves, so that you have different pressure points riding there and then riding back. We went and had lunch at my aunt's. I think we were able to switch things up. But Jeff was right there. And I always remember Jeff doing his research, and he says, you know what? We have to consume 1,000 calories of food. And he's got his power bars and his power gel. And he shows me this big handful. And I was like, I can't eat that. So what I did was I had 6 bagels with peanut butter and jam slapped on each half, and then slam them together. So, but that was 12 hours. I think it was a pretty good day for the most part, except for maybe the last hour and a half.
Mm.
And then at some point, because we rode east along Highway 2 through all the towns to Kingston, downtown to Kingston, and then we rode back home west along Highway 33, which is the Loyalist Parkway. And we got to Picton, and I told Jeff, I said, "Oh, I can't eat another bagel, man. I need something different." So we shared a half a Subway sub just to get a different taste in our mouth. It was 12 hours, 321 kilometers. Anyway, so we can say Jeff and I have been able to cycle and cover all the milestones. You've got like the 50K, the 100K, you've got the 100-miler, the 60-miler, and now we have the 200-miler, which is the 320K. So,
well, to be fair, I didn't do that.
Oh, well, you were a few kilometers short, but that's okay.
20 or so kilometers. I think I made it. I think as I rolled in, I was 298 kilometers, and I thought, okay, I got to make it to 300. So I did the 300. But You had started in Port Hope. I started in Coburg.
We live 8 kilometers apart from each other now.
Now, yeah. So your goal was to do the 200-mile. Mine was at that point. I was like, okay, now that I didn't have to take the ambulance back, I'm going to do 300 kilometers. So that ended up being my goal, and achieved it by riding, or I think around the block a few times just to make that extra to do the 300. But yeah, challenging in some cases. The food issue was an issue for me. I ended up having cramps about 60 kilometers from home.
Yeah.
And that that really hurt. But pressed through it, and we made it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we even got out the next day for a little bit of a ride just to, keep things loose and that sort of stuff. But I remember jumping in the shower that night. The nether regions between your legs were quite sore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. Anyway, those are fun challenges, and obviously, because these were years ago, we don't forget them. So
no,
you challenge, you do, and they're monumental, and they remain in your memory, which is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, especially when you get to share it with a good friend and
agreed.
Do as we do now. We'll still get out to ride, but lots of times we'll be sitting around because we've discovered craft beer. And I remember the church lady showing up at the J Peak Craft Beer Festival.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is with the East Coast in the U.S. because J Peak is in Vermont. They really like their hoppy beer. And I was like, oh, man. But Jeff was on a mission. He wanted to get a buzz, and then he wanted me. I was the designated driver. And
I don't know. Did I have a mission to get a buzz that day? I don't think.
Well, you wanted to keep your buzz on the way home, so you wouldn't lose it by the time we got home.
That is true. Once I got it, but it was more a case of I enjoyed the tasting, the different flavors.
Yeah,
and I just kept going, and they just kept pouring larger and larger glasses.
Oh yeah,
it seems. So,
yeah.
And I'm not one to waste. So
yeah. And it's kind of continued to today. We don't go to that beer festival as much, and it's changed. It's not as the way it was when Jeff and I went, but you know what, wherever he and I travel, we always bring back beer so that we can share with each other and sit in each other's backyard and have civilized beer tastings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
hopefully we'll get back to that.
Yeah. I know during this, as I call it, the COVID time, if we can get back to the time before COVID, we'll be able to do those sorts of things. And similarly with coffee and that sort of stuff. So Jeff and I still get together and enjoy each other's company. And I was just thinking, we have to get out snowshoeing now. We have snow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because we've been out snowshoeing and cross-country skiing at my daughter's place, and she lives in the middle of a 350-acre field and woods and all that sort of stuff. So that's where I'm going to go and ski this afternoon because our ski resorts are closed. So I got to get a turn or two down this field. And on my way over, I was like, oh, Jeff and Christine should come snowshoeing with Sean and I. It's an awesome workout. Go out for, a 5K snowshoe or a 3K snowshoe, depending on the lay of the land.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely be up for that. I know Christine's wanted to do snowshoeing, and I don't think she's ever tried it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to watch her.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways, I don't know what else you want to talk about.
Well, we still haven't addressed the Skippy.
Oh, right.
So you have the name Skippy, and I know that the at least I think it started on Facebook Live where you were doing the Skippy report, and you were named Skippy Ding Ding. So what's the history behind Skippy? How did you come up with the name?
So if you listen to the very first episode of the Skippy report, which is very short, it gives you a little bit of a background of where the Skippy report came from, how it was developed. But the name Skippy comes from this guy who played basketball in my high school, O'Neill Collegiate in Oshawa, and his name was Brent Quinn. And he was a few years younger than me. And he was a guard, small forward, big guard. And he had a tell in his shot. And his tell was this skip. Anyway, so this other guy, Rob Rocker, would give everybody nicknames. And so we were traveling around playing tournaments. We went to Elmira, New York, and Brent had discovered pinball machines, and pinball machines go ding, ding, ding. And somehow Rob Rocker said, your nickname is now Skippy Ding Ding. So that's how I don't know, I just called everything the Skippy Report because that's what appeared in my head. No real logic to it, but that's the history behind Skippy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you've adopted somebody else's name.
Yeah, I have. And when I was doing this, trying to figure out this podcast name, I was going to call it Gear, Beer, and anything weird. And my wife, Sean, goes, oh, you can't call it that. Like, you've got a presence on Facebook, because I do wherever I travel. Like I said, I'll do the Skippy Report. And it could be somewhere stupid. It could be somewhere kind of cool. And so it's like, okay, I'll just call it the Skippy Report. So Sean thinks that maybe in the future these podcasts will be filmed. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep audio wise.
Yeah, I got to say, I have laughed at the Skippy Report, and I've groaned more than I've laughed in most cases. But the Skippy Report would end with the skipping roving weather report.
That's right.
And I'm like, you didn't even report the weather, dude.
Yeah. So that's why it used to be called the Skippy Ding Ding Action News Roving Weather Report. And that's the way it was. And then sometimes I would forget to do the weather. So then Jeff said, why don't you just call it the Skippy Report or something like that, or the Colbert Report? So it's like, yeah, okay, we'll call it the Skippy Report. So that's how the blog has developed, evolved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
So our next challenge?
Our next challenge?
Yeah.
Get out of COVID so that we can get our trailers going. So some of the two trailers that we are sitting between, one is a car trailer and the other one is a small toy hauler. So we want to get out with our toy haulers and go somewhere. I think that should be the next challenge.
Yeah, that sounds good. Our toy hauler is typically used for business. We call it the event trailer.
Right.
Yeah.
Jeff spent all this money just so he could have a warm toilet for his staff, really.
Well, it's a big part of it. Yeah.
Or office.
and both. Yeah, and both. And a place to eat.
Yeah.
We go into, in some cases, some secluded areas to do tire testing, or if we're putting on an event in an off-road setting, that we can bring the trailer to a certain point. It becomes a place where our guests or our staff can use as an office, a warming shelter, and a washroom. So it works in a number of ways. And the one I own now has a Murphy bed. So if I am using it for other reasons, and we use it at the racetrack a lot too. We bring it to the track along with the car trailer, brings the race car. And so we have a place, again, called an office to change into our racing gear and or sleep overnight. And I use it for spectating when I'm racing, or when I'm watching racing, or being a spotter. I don't have to get the expense of a hotel on top of it. I can just stay at the track, which is great.
And sometimes we'll take our trailer up to Mossport because it's not that far from our house. And when Jeff is coaching, sometimes there's quite a compound of trailers. We'll have our trailer and Richard's trailer there, so that's where people sleep, that sort of stuff. And then Jeff's got his car trailer and toy hauler down at the race compound. So he's got his office there, and whoever he's coaching can have a place to sit and analyze their race and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I got to say, that's the most fun for me now, is when I am racing and coaching at the same time, having a bit of a community there with the trailers and that, and where you can just sort of kick your feet up at the end of the day. And you're still talking racing, of course.
Yeah.
You're still talking how the day went, but you're enjoying a meal and a beer with everybody.
You don't have to rush home.
No, it's nice. It's a nice community. It becomes a campground, really, at that point. That makes it a lot of fun.
Right. Mm-hmm. So with COVID going on, racetracks are closed for the most part around the world, small racetracks and that sort of stuff. So Jeff just recently participated in the 24 Hours of Daytona.
Right.
Yes. So he's moved from real racing to virtual racing. So what's your experience in that?
So I have in virtual racing. There's a software that is live. It's on. I don't know how to best to describe it. It's called iRacing, and
It's on the web, right?
it is on the web. It's not a game within your computer, although parts of it are. Most of it is live on, I guess, servers wherever their head office is. And I've had this software for a number of years because I've used it. They've got a lot of racetracks around, and if I'm coaching somebody and they're going to a racetrack I haven't been to before, I can actually go on to the racetrack and learn it and learn some of the nuances so that I can actually teach the guy that I'm working with, even if I don't go to the racetrack. I can talk to him on the phone, which I have, and he would send me his data at the end of the day. I could analyze it based on the track. I can see the track. That's how I'd used it up until the beginning of 2020, and then one of my staff, Richard, is big into iRacing, and the guy that I've been coaching most over the last 5 years, Peter. He's into iRacing as well, and they encouraged me to get a little bit more into it. So I had some pretty bad equipment, hardware, that is, steering wheel and pedals, plastic things, and I started doing it a little bit more. And then Richard basically lent me some of his gear, and I got more into it. And most recently, I got into the full immersion of VR.
What's virtual reality?
Virtual reality,
okay.
yeah. So
I'm not a computer geek, even though I do this.
I was going to explain it anyway, because I figured most people may or may not know. And so now I'm wearing, because I was using, in car racing, when you're doing this, you can use a single screen, which basically you see forward, and you kind of guess what's beside you. Or you can use triple screens where you have two screens outside of that, so you can actually see out your left mirror, your left window, and see the rear view mirror or the side view mirror out the driver's side and out the passenger side as well, using the 3 screens. I didn't have 3 screens; I only had one. And so now that I am immersed in virtual, meaning that I'm wearing goggles, they're called Oculus Rift goggles, and now wherever I turn my head, I can see. So if I turn my head to the left, I see out the left window. I turn my head to the right, I see out the right window. I have full immersion, and going from that, and I had struggled, and I had worked really hard, and I found it very frustrating because when I'm on the real racetrack, I have always been very, very consistent on the racetrack. And every lap after lap after lap, turn-in points are within inches of each other, and times were within a tenth to 2/10 of a second every single lap that I would go around, unless there was traffic. That's one of the things I prided myself on, as being really, really consistent, and that's important in racing. And when I got into the virtual world with a single screen, I couldn't get it. You lose a bunch of your senses, and I didn't realize how much I relied on the movement of the car, and that sense in itself, where your torso, your bum are moving or feeling the movement from the seat, which is connected to the rest of the car, and I can feel the tires move. I could feel the suspension move. All that through the sensory, the kinetic sensory of my body. And when I got into the virtual world, I didn't have that.
Right.
I was sitting in a seat that didn't move. I got some feedback through the steering wheel, but I didn't realize that I didn't take much information from the steering wheel. I really took it from the rest of my body, the sensory from that. And I only realized it once I got into the virtual world. So I was trying to change myself and train myself and turn it over. I'd always worked hard on visibility and seeing. Again, back to the skiers.
Yeah.
You know that if you're looking only at the gate that you're approaching, you're not going to make it probably past the gate past that. So you really have to look further down the road and around the corners, and I couldn't do that because I had a single screen. So I was very frustrated and wasn't consistent, and it was just I would have a good lap and I'd have 5 bad laps.
Right.
So it became frustrating. I just kept pushing through because I thought, oh, eventually I'll break through and I'll get there. And then I got these goggles. Richard again lent them to me. Immediately 2 seconds a lap.
Wow.
Immediately consistent. It was just incredible. So I have a new life in that now, or new refreshed life in that. Most recently, we ran the Daytona 24-hour.
Yeah. Before you get going there, can I ask you? Jeff was telling me this on the phone one day when we were talking. We check into each other every couple of weeks. And you said you were having difficulty locating the shifter or something like that. Because when you put on these goggles, then you cannot see what your hardware is like in front of you.
Yeah.
So, it was interesting. So how did you manage with that? Because did you just stick with the goggles the whole time?
Yeah, I'm staying with the goggles, and so there is that definite trade-off in that when you're not wearing goggles, you can see everything. Like if you have a keyboard key that you use to change something, some of the things, and there's a lot to learn when it comes to going into the virtual world, is you become a number of things that you aren't on the real racetrack. In the real racetrack, when you get in the car, you're driving. And in the car levels of cars that we have, there's not a lot of sophistication. You're not changing the brake bias during your lap or during the race. You're not changing anything. You're not planning your pit stop unless you are on a radio and you're in an endurance race. You can talk to your crew chief and say, okay, I think we need tires, which typically we don't do in our type of racing. We don't change the tires.
Hey, I've even, Jeff is talking about the lack of sophistication in the race car. I've been on his crew sometimes, and he's been, one of the cars was that Honda Civic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the entry level that they were in when Jeff was helping coach one of his clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And we use that car because it's a slow car. It's great for teaching in that respect, but it's so sophisticated that the gas gauge doesn't even work. So anyway, not to paint a bad picture, it's a good car actually, but that's the only thing that really doesn't work. But in endurance racing, that's a bit of a difficult thing. So we had to start measuring in the real racetrack how much fuel we put in and how far the car could go, so that we would know when to pit. Anyway, in the virtual world, you're doing all of that by yourself. So if you got to come in and you've got to refuel, and you've got 10 laps left and your car can do 30 laps on a tank of fuel, you only want so much fuel. So now you've got to change that, and you've got a keypad that you can, preset things in. Okay. Well, when you're wearing the virtual goggles, you got to find the keypad because you can't see it.
Right.
So I started putting, I made a couple of keys side by side, two pair of keys side by side, and I put Velcro on them, one with the female Velcro and one with the male Velcro, and I memorized what I could do with those. The information pops up on my screen, and then I have a number of buttons and dials on the steering wheel, which are a whole lot easier to find while you're driving. And once I put the proper screen up, I could move around on that screen using the buttons and dials on the steering wheel and change that. But it was a whole learning curve, and I don't have everything figured out yet, but it was, once I got there, it made it a bunch easier. But it was, again, you're developing something in a virtual world and making it work for you.
And you're not getting any kinesthetic feedback from where you're sitting.
No. Yeah. I mean, other than the feedback through the steering wheel that you're getting, you get the audio, which is pretty good, and you can change how much audio you get. So you typically don't get tire noise because you're on a slick tire. They don't squeal so much.
Right.
But you can get wind noise, and it's pretty darn accurate in this, that when you get behind another car, you can hear the wind noise change.
Oh, really?
So that you know that you're in a draft.
Oh, okay.
Which is pretty cool.
Right.
They do a very good job with all of the information that they put in from the real world and making it, adapting it to. And then there's tire wear and
Yeah.
and setup of the vehicle that's very good.
Well, when you were talking about the noise, I always remember, because you'll watch NASCAR on TV and they have cameras inside the cars, but you don't hear, I don't know what they use for mics and that sort of stuff. But then we have a friend, mostly Jeff's friend, Brian Max, who has raced in the Nissan Micra Cup, and he's racing this Micra, and he's got these videos, and it's like, holy cow, man, it sounds like a tin can in there, when he's racing. Yeah, it's
yeah, and a lot of times that is the case. I had a Mazda RX-8, and same thing. I have some videos that we had something in the suspension that wasn't sitting. The spring wasn't sitting
right.
properly, so any move you made, it was just like
right.
throughout the video, and it was like, oh, this is so annoying.
Right.
So I had to do a music overlay if I was actually going to post it or anything, because it was just so bad. But the vehicles typically, and Brian's is no different, they strip out everything in the car, so it's just it
is
just
a tin.
Yeah. So there's no insulation, there's no door panels.
Yep.
The door panels are taken up with a roll cage, so that you only have the outside door skin.
Right.
You don't have the inside. So there's about 3 inches or so there that you can move the roll cage outwards to give you a little bit more cushion room if you do get an impact from the side. Yeah.
It's been kind of cool because, like, even when Jeff talked about the RX-8 that he had, so Jeff has raced a couple of times in Newfoundland Targa, which is it's basically a rally race.
Okay. It's a rally race. It's they call it a tarmac rally, where most rallies are either on snow or gravel roads. This one is primarily on pavement.
Right.
There's a little bit of gravel in some cases, and we've experienced being in Newfoundland. You're out on the east coast, and I know we got there one time, and I think it was a month before they'd had a flood in one area because of a hurricane, and the roads were washed out, and we had a whole section that was not quite a kilometer long, but it was all gravel.
Right.
But other than that, it's all tarmac.
Right.
Yeah.
It's cool if you ever get the opportunity, the listener should check it out on YouTube, because I'm sure because there were several races, right? There's one like in Tasmania or New Zealand, one in Newfoundland, and like people will, if you have a small budget, drive your race car across the country and race in the race, or if you have a little more of a budget, you can get your car shipped there and that sort of stuff. But, the people of Newfoundland really welcome this race. And I remember seeing some of the video that Jeff had. You're racing through a neighborhood, and some people don't make a turn, and they're got their car stuck in somebody's house. And it's, Jeff was saying that, it's like a badge of honor. This car here crashed into my house. Or I remember that one Porsche, he's in the ocean because he missed a turn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they hit a little bit of road gravel. And it slid into the ocean in that case. And I think it was the same for the house.
Right.
The one house, I remember the year we were there, we were running in second place in our class, and it was Thursday. So the race is Monday to Friday. And we were behind this car by about 30 seconds in overall. And they shortly after lunch were heading through this area. It was a small fishing village, and there was a 90-degree right-hand turn, and they missed it and ran into this house. And I found out after the fact that it was the same house that a car hit the year before.
Oh, jeez.
So the following year, which we didn't go to, I watched some video, and I noticed that they had a whole bunch of water barrels in front of them. So they wouldn't hit it the third time. But they had literally just got the house completely fixed like a month or two before the race, and then somebody ran into it again. And luckily their houses are they sit up because they're right at the waterfront, just in case there's a water level come up. They actually are on stilts, and I think they sit about 4 feet off the ground. And if you can imagine like a mobile home,
right?
They're like that. They don't look it, but that's and then they just have siding that goes down to the bottom to make it look like they're not sitting on stilts. But that's essentially what they ran into.
Yeah, and the Targa race is a stage race, so the racers like a typical rally race. You've got the driver, you have the navigator. They're in a stage and they're racing. I have a picture of Jeff doing 200 kilometers an hour over a little knoll or something like that, and there's no rubber on the ground. And but when they get to the end of that stage, then they have to drive normal speed, and the police know that the race is happening, so they're a little aware of these race cars and making sure that they're traveling the regular speed. So they have to drive their cars between stages and then stage and get ready to race again.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, and I think most rally races are like this. But for me, having only done road racing prior to that, it was a new world for me. It was pretty neat to be immersed into it. Yeah, and literally just that. I mean, you would drive to the first stage, and normal speeds, normal road. We'd be in our racing gear, with less our helmet, and drive to the stage. Once we got into the lineup, and we had a particular time when we were to go. Time slot that we had to go. We would get ourselves ready, helmet on, and so on, and prepare all the equipment, and then we'd race.
Right.
And we'd race for. I think our shortest stage was 2 kilometers. Our longest stage was 40 kilometers, and we would run that, and then take our helmet off, or if the next stage was. And there were some cases like this. The next stage was like 2 kilometers down the road.
Right,
Just keep our helmet on, drive slow speeds, and make it to the next stage. But I mean, I can still remember us running at a stage and just saying, "Okay, there's no way I can make this stage. I got to pee."
Right.
So we'd run up with our helmets on to somebody's house and say, "Can we use your washroom?" Because there were no washrooms there.
Right.
And here we are standing in somebody's house in their powder room or something, peeing with our helmet on. It was just this. I just imagine somebody looking at me thinking, "Oh, it's so stupid."
Right.
But yeah,
only in Newfoundland would that happen, right? In Canada, anyways.
Yeah.
Or the East Coast.
Yeah. And it was very neat in its sense that. We raced out in the countryside. We raced through fishing villages, and sometimes both in the same stage. A lot of times both in the same stage. We raced in Gander, and through neighborhoods.
Right.
So they were all subdivisions and
yeah.
crescents, and pretty much all 90-degree turns. And people would sit on their porches watching and. It was just a neat atmosphere, and in between the stages where we were doing what they call transits, oftentimes they would have because we're going from community to community and community, and to get everybody engaged in it, we had places where we would stop, and it was part of our mandate was to stop for 10 minutes in each location, and it was an autograph session.
Right.
So. People from the area would bring their kids, and they would be there waiting, and we'd pull in, and we'd have pictures of our race car, and we would sign them, and
right.
we're nobodies
really.
I mean, nobody knows who we are outside of this race, and we're wearing a racing suit, signing these autographs, and they loved it.
Yeah.
It was fun for us. It was fun for them. We were engaged with the community, and every night there was a car show in each of the different villages we stopped in. And people came out in droves to see the cars, and we're working on them to get them ready for the next day, and talking to everybody. It was just a total immersion, very, very, very cool experience, and I'm really glad that I did. I did it for a couple of years, and we had
your last year you actually won your division, right?
Yeah, well, because some guy drove in a house. Yeah, it was a pretty good year in that there's a number of cars, and there's different divisions, of course, and all different speeds of cars, but everybody has I can't think of the word right now. It's not
like a handicap.
Yes, thank you. So the handicap system based on your horsepower and so on, and so we were in what's called the modern class. We had it was the RX-8. And it was a modern class. There were 27 cars in that class. And on Thursday, we were running second. My navigator at the time, it was his first race to navigate. He was brilliant. And navigators are very, very important in that. And that, we got into the second day on the Tuesday. And I think it was around lunchtime, I said to him, okay, here's how it's going to go. And I'd already been coaching him because I'd done it the year before with a different navigator on what I wanted to hear and, just the words that I needed to hear while I'm driving and to what information I needed. But by the middle of the second day on Tuesday, I said to him as we were transiting at one point, I said, you haven't made a mistake. Everything you've told me has been bang on. And so I'm at a point now where I'm going to trust you implicitly. So if you say we're coming up to a 90-degree turn to the right and I can't see it, I'm going to trust that it's there. And when you tell me that's in 10, meaning that there's a tenth of a kilometer to go, I'm going to be ready to turn.
Right.
And I'm going to turn to the right if you tell me it's to the right. And even if I can't see it.
Right.
So if there's any doubt in your mind, you tell me that you think.
Right.
And then we'll do a quick discussion and make a decision at that point. Or I'll pull back a little bit so that we have time to make the decision, split decision at the end. Split second decision. And it was at that point, it was just like everything was perfect. Like when you're going over a crest
everything was in sync.
Yeah, when you're going over a crest of a hill and you're doing 170 kilometers an hour and you don't know what's on the other side.
Right.
You don't know whether there's a slight bend to the right, a slight bend to the left, or whether it's perfectly straight.
Right.
And I know the year previous, I'd come to the crest of the hill and I'd back off.
Right.
And then it's, get over the hill, and it's like flat on the floor again. Oh, I just lost like 20 kilometers an hour. And with him, he would say, this is what it is.
Right.
And foot would be buried the whole time. And it made such a difference. We brought us up. We were in second place on the Thursday, as I said. And the other car drove into the house, made a mistake. We went into first and never left it.
For people who don't know this, the navigator, their head is buried in a binder. They do so much prep. They go through making all their notes the night or days before, and they just kind of sit looking at a binder, and they do the stages or the course with their face buried in a binder, talking to the driver, saying in so many meters, there's a 45, there's a 90, there's a stop sign, that sort of stuff. So they're not a passive passenger. They're like, and I would imagine that you wouldn't want to have too much motion sickness.
No, that's definitely one of the criteria. My first navigator did have motion sickness, and he wore a motion sickness patch throughout the week, and it did end up affecting him later in the week because he would just had too much of that.
Right.
But this guy, Mike, my second navigator, did not have motion sickness. Was a race instructor, former instructor, had spent some time in the passenger seat instructing, so I knew he could handle the motion, and also have the advantage of being a driver as well, knowing what the motion meant, even if he wasn't seeing it. Right. So that was a big advantage. There was something else I was going to say about him as well, in that his calm approach was important.
Right.
And the other thing I was going to say is that unlike if you've not seen this rally in particular, the regular rallies that are out there, they do what they call recce's. So they go out and they actually make their own notes on the course that they're going to run. This particular one is you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go onto the course and see the course prior to driving it. So when we go on it, both the navigator and the driver have never, in theory, seen the course before. So it's a route book that has been developed by a professional navigator who's put the book together, and then you have to trust what that navigator has done. And so there's something like 3,500 turns that we would make.
Wow.
And there would be in the notes, there would be probably 1,000 turns that are actually noted. Other
Right.
ones aren't that important.
Right.
And that's why it was a case of, we had to make judgment calls
Right.
on a few things. But just
Crazy.
outstanding. Yeah. There are, I think, some, and this is back in 2007. So we're talking 15 so years ago. But there are still some videos on YouTube. If you search Targa Newfoundland and the RX-8,
Right.
you'd probably be able to find them. I think we have 3 videos up there that are in-car videos.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it's getting to that time, so I'd like to thank Jeff for providing a space so that we could not have to wear face masks, and taking his time to sit down and chat, and gives us a reason to get together, because during this COVID time, we try to stay away from everybody, stay in our houses, stay safe, and all that sort of stuff. So thank you very much, Jeff, for coming on the show.
You're welcome, and it's been my pleasure.
All right. Check back in a couple of weeks for another Skippy Report.